All right, so we're kind of losing our paddles here. So I'm going to right click on the assets folder and just create a folder called art. And then within the art folder, I'm going to create a folder and I'm just going to call this player. And really this could be if you want to create a model in a 3D program or whatever, but for now we're just going to use what's there. And we're going to right click again and we're going to create and somewhere in the middle here look for this material. And we're going to call this player. I usually do underscore MTRL material all caps. And then where my player one paddle is, I'm just going to drag and drop this in here, or you can drag and drop it here. And if you want, you can do like, uh, whatever colors you want. So let's say this guy's blue, something like this. And maybe we go lighter. And then also like maybe we'll select our main camera and we can go with the default black and that'll make everything pop, or maybe just the darker, something like that. And then we have a player here, and then let's just name this maybe player one. And then we'll make another folder here in art and just call this player underscore 02. And same thing. We could actually just select this and hit Control D and then drag this into player two and then just change this to player 02. And remember later, go back and update the other material so it says player 01. And then on this material, I can just drag and drop into a scene. That's another way of doing it. And then we could just make this player, I don't know, whatever you want, purple or something. So we have blue versus this pinkish purple. All right, and then what we want to do is in the assets folder, right click again and create another folder called scripts. And then within this folder, I'm going to create a C# script. And I'm going to call this script player controller. And I'm going to attach this to player 01 paddle. Now, you're probably using Visual Studio. I use actually this program called Writer. So if you look at, if I go to project settings here, and if you're using Writer as well, you can go to editor here. And let's see, is it edit preferences instead of project settings? Yeah, external tools. You could see mine defaults to Writer. And that was edit preferences. So that's just a preference that I use. So don't let it throw you out if you're using Visual Studio. It's really I like Writer a lot because just it's a little bit lighter weight, but it costs money. And actually, as a student, I think you can get it for free. So please email me or reach out to me if you can't find how to apply for that. But I think it's completely free if you have a .edu. And then the last thing I want you to double check is under Project Settings Editor to look down and make sure that you have Enter Play Mode options checked down so that we don't reload domain or reload scene. All right, I'm going to double click this player controller, then I'm going to pause the video and let Writer open. All right, so let's create a public float, and we're going to call this speed. And this is going to control our paddle speed. I'm just going to make it 5 for now. We could always change it to something else. So let's go back into Unity to make sure that worked. So if I select my player 01 paddle, remember that we attached the script. Now you can see that our speed is 5. And because we made it public, we can always update it to 10 or 2 or 1025 or whatever it is. All right. And generally, I'll switch back and forth just for confidence to make sure I didn't type anything wrong. You'll generally get an error down here below your game view if there are any errors or you type something wrong. Okay, so back to Writer. Let's start programming some of the logic. Now we're going to be using physics. So I'm going to change update to fixed update. Fixed update is generally used anytime you do any kind of physics stuff. All right, so the next thing we want to do is we want to create something, a reference to to a rigid body component, but we actually kind of need to add that. So let's add that on our paddle. Now, if this is the first class you took with me and you're not familiar with rigid bodies, just briefly, it's the way that physics are added inside of Unity. So I'm going to type in rigid body. Now, if I turn on use gravity, sorry, that's the material. Here's the rigid body. If use gravity is checked on, watch what happens to our paddle when I press play in our scene. Notice it just kind of falls down. And if I rotate it this way and I press play, Notice it kind of like falls and it, teeters. So I'm going to undo that. So there's a couple things we want to do. One, we definitely still want to use gravity, but we want to just use gravity to move it, right? Instead of our paddle. So let's go back, and let's actually, what we can do is, um, yeah, let's jump back into the script and let's look at how we can access this rigid body component inside of our script. So how we can actually use this. Okay, so generally I would make it private so we don't load up the script with a bunch of open exposed variables. But for now, just so you could see it in action, I'm going to do public and then rigid body. And that's going to create a variable. Remember, this is a variable, and this one's holding a float, which is any number that can hold a decimal. So it can hold something like this, which makes it a little bit more incremental, stronger, more incremental. So I'm just going to name this RB, which is sort of a generic convention here. And I'm going to hit Control S to save this. All right, to save a little bit of time, I went ahead and typed this out. But moving forward, we're going to, I'm going to essentially go line by line with you. It's just this one is a little similar to the other tutorials that we did. So, but I'm going to definitely do that. So as you type this out, here we have a reference to that rigid body component that's attached to our script, or the rigid body component that is attached to our player paddle here. If you guys remember that. And that's this here. So notice that it says none here. And what we can do is, as it says none here, is if we have this in here, where we're saying rigid body equals get component rigid body, and we press play, you can see it automatically loads it in there. Now, if we continue on with our script, what you'll notice is we have this variable, this function here called fixed update. And what we're doing is we're storing we have a float value, which is a decimal value called move vertical. But notice this kind of weird text here. We're getting an input. The input we're getting is the get axis. So this could be a controller axis or the axis of using your up and down keys or W and S on your keyboard. Vertical. So this is very strange. So what is this vertical here? Well, if we go back into our project, and let me uncheck play here for a second. We go to edit and we go to project settings, and you notice off on the side here, we have an input manager. And underneath it, if you go to yours and you expand this under axis here, you'll notice that we have a vertical here, and we also have a vertical down here. Now, this vertical down here is mapped to a joystick. It's kind of set up for you. But under the name vertical, if we use that with input.getAxis, we have access to the down key on your keyboard, the up key, up arrow key on your keyboard, and S and W. And you could always change these values to whatever you want on the keyboard. And then there's a little bit of gravity, dead zone, all that good stuff. So with those, what it's saying is if I press the S or W key, we're going to get a positive or negative value. So notice here that if I move this paddle upward, the values go up. It's positive because it's on a Cartesian graph here. If I move it down, our values go negative. So back in our script here, all we're doing with this variable here is as I'm pushing W and S, it's storing that and move vertical. And that's what fixed update does. It's called once per frame. So it's always recording how much we push. But that's not actually moving our paddle. And it's not telling us where we're moving it. So on this next variable here, which is a vector3, and you can see we're calling it movement, and we're making it equal to new vector3. This is just allocating new memory inside the computer. And we're not moving it on X, that's 0. We're not moving it on Z, that's 0. But we're going to move it on the Y-axis. So on the Y-axis, this movement here is going to take this value, and it's going to say, okay, on the Y-axis, we're storing this value. Now, the way we're going to move it is we have this rigid body here, and we're going to add some velocity to it. So as we push the W and S key, we're going to make that equal to the Y-axis, the amount we do in a movement here, and then times speed. Now, multiplying it by speed gives us a little bit of control over how much force it is. Now, what we're going to notice here is, let's go back in here for a second. Notice that we have our none, our speed. If I leave gravity on and I press play, notice it starts to fall, but it kind of fights it, like it's moving down because of that gravity. What I can do is I can just turn gravity off. And now with that script, as I press W and S, it's using the velocity or the force that we're doing to move this paddle up and down, or if I'm using the up and down arrow keys. Like I said, in the future, we'll probably do the ball controller next. I'll go line by line on that one.